Welcome to Commander Central, episode 213, and today we're going to conduct a little exercise in what we would change if certain cards were banned from our decks. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Alfred Singagore from Turkey.
Welcome back, Chris. How's it going?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me back. I feel glorious on this wonderful day.
So hopefully this will be
The norm?
the norm going forward, is the ability to have you record remotely, and we all should be on. So yeah, cool.
Yeah,
good to have you back.
Nothing breaks, because I have no clue what I'm doing with some of this stuff.
Yeah, we actually went to your house and set this all up, helped you set it all up last
Yep.
weekend. So hopefully things will work smoothly here. So we haven't really gotten many games played in person lately for obvious reasons, but I think Max got to play some webcam games last weekend.
I did. I got to play this past week, actually. I got to play with Chris Von Doom and Ryan Sullivan and Glenn Runyon, all of our patron supporters. We got a game in the other night. Really fun, grindy game. Was a couple hours long. Jamoka took to the skies and won it, though.
I think that was the night that the EDH Recast was streaming, because you said, because you usually stop in and watch for a few minutes, and you're like, yeah, I couldn't because we played a 3-hour game.
Yeah.
At the same time, EDH Rec 1 wound up going 3 hours for like one game as well.
Ooh.
So it was, and it wasn't like it was a bad game. It was just one game that no one could, like, everyone had an answer for something, it seemed like.
Yeah, ours was just stalled board states, people digging for answers, and we did have some technical difficulties with Spell Table, but you know what? We got through them and we were still able to finish the game.
Nice. And then you and I actually got to play last weekend with a couple patron supporters, with Dan Krause and Dylan.
Yes.
I believe. So we got to get a couple games in there, and we're going to try to do that, once or twice a month too. We've said that, and we'll reach out to people and do a little bit of that when we can. And I think we also had another Command Fest online that got announced this week.
We did.
End of August, I believe, correct?
Yeah, it's actually the weekend Magic Fest Vegas would have happened. So it's the Saturday and Sunday, August 22nd and 23rd.
So the previous one was the weekend that would have been Magic Fest Seattle, so this is the one for Vegas, so I'm guessing that's kind of intentional on their part. For the big Magic Fest, they want to still try to do something, so I'm guessing we'll try to get some games in for that as well, and we can post some information as that gets a little bit closer.
Yeah.
And then we were just talking about this too offline, but Chris can mention it again here since he has the info. We just got an announcement today as well about a special product for the upcoming, was it for Double Masters, Chris?
Yeah, Double Masters, the VIP edition, the contents of the edition. And this was relayed to me by one of the guys on my Traveling Magic team. So the contents include, it is 33 cards plus 2 foil tokens. You will get 2 foil borderless rare/mythic rares only found in the VIP edition, 2 foil rares/mythic rares, 8 foil uncommons, 9 foil commons, 10 full art basic lands only found in the VIP edition, 2 of each basic, obviously, 2 foil full art basic lands only found in the VIP edition. These will be randomly selected, and then 2 foil tokens only found in the VIP edition, but this token is like a double-sided token like we've seen before.
The borderless lands, I think, are all art we've seen before, but those look really, really good.
Should be pretty good. I mean,
I
don't know.
They're the John Avon art. Those are what got previewed
Yeah.
today. So it's the original John Avon art from Unhinged. Was that the second one?
Yeah, I believe so.
In a new frame. So it's not the original floating frame like an Unhinged. It's more of what we've seen in the past few standard sets.
But those look really, really, really good too.
After I hunted down all of my original ones, now I'm going to get them anyways.
So is this a thing either of you two are interested in?
Kind of, I guess, but go for it.
Go ahead, Chris. Nope, you're back. You go.
So I'm kind of interested in it. The big thing that's catching me with this is the price point of it. And
Yeah.
especially with how things are right now in the world that nowadays, it's, that price point's a little high for me anyways.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I mean, I'm glad we got this reprint. There's a lot of cards in there that needed it. Although Jumpstart and the core set did a really good job there too, but reprints are always useful for people out there who are just trying to get in and trying to get some of these cards that are crazy price, so I'm glad to see it. This product right now at this point in time is probably not something that I'm willing to dump a lot of money into. But this is the kind of thing that I actually can't complain about too much. If you don't want it, don't get it. Like, you're not missing out. If you're a competitive player and the only way to get a certain card is from doing this, that sucks. But this isn't that. Like, this is a situation where this only matters if you're blinging out decks. It's not affecting you playing in a tournament. It's not affecting you building whatever you want to build. It's just a different printed version of a card, and if you don't want it or can't afford it, you can opt out and nothing is lost. If anything, it may help you because it might knock down the cost of the non-special versions of these cards and make it easier to get in for folks who don't really care about what the art looks like. So it's a win-win as far as I'm concerned, even if I'm not going to buy it. I think it's this kind of thing is just good in general for people trying to get more cards and make more decks. If you would like to reach out to us and tell you what you think of us or the show, or say welcome back, Chris, or talk about any of these new expensive products coming out, how would you find us online, Chris?
I have forgotten. It's his.
Oh, I caught you. I caught you.
No, actually, I haven't forgotten at all. So you can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us on YouTube at CMDR Central, and you can find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
You can also find us on patreon.com.
Yeah, head over to patreon.com/CMDR Central and check out our reward tiers. If you're able to support us financially, we greatly appreciate it. And we want to say hello and thank you to 2 new patrons, Lou Javinaire Della Coste, and I screwed all of that up, and you're welcome.
So bad.
And then Josh Granke.
Lou and Josh, thank you very much. See, I can take the easy one. I can just say Lou. So Max has to do all the work and draw all the ire. But no, thank you both very much for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone, even if you just click like or upvote us on any of the podcast mediums you listen to the show, that helps a lot too. We appreciate that. Any little bit makes a difference. So thanks for the engagement and thanks for any help we can get. It is a big deal. All right, so let's jump into the main topic here. One of the things we try to do on the show, in addition to at least hoping we're somewhat entertaining, is we hope you walk away a little bit more informed than when you started listening. And one way to kind of do that, in addition to just like saying this card's good that maybe you didn't know about, because that is a thing we do enough of it, but a lot of shows do that. I find it useful to hear people's thought processes. The Legendary Creature podcast is one I listen to quite a bit, and I think they do a really nice job of like basically talking through their thoughts. They'll like, what do we think of this card? And then they'll basically just like spend 20 minutes letting you hear what's happening in their brains. And I find that to be really, really useful. Even if it's not a card I want to run, hearing somebody like rationalize why they like or dislike a card or something, I always find to be interesting and informative and helpful. So the exercise we're going to do here is we are going to ban a certain card from each of our decks and then explain what we would do to replace that card. And we try to pick ones that were interesting to that deck. So like, you could ban Soul Ring from a deck, and the obvious choice is just to run another good mana rock. That probably isn't a very good conversation. So we tried to pick ones that were interesting to the deck and would have an impact so we can see what everyone would replace them with and why they would do that. So we'll start with a few of my decks here, and I think Max has the first card. What is it going to be, Max?
Yeah, Dana, so we're going to kick it off with your Vela the Nightclad Artifact Tribal deck. And my first card for you is Mystic Forge. If that were to be banned today, what would you replace it with?
Okay, so we've talked about my Vela deck a little bit on the show before, but for a refresher here for those that aren't familiar, Vela is a human wizard. She has an ability where she has Intimidate, and she gives all my creatures Intimidate, and she also deals damage to people when creatures leave the battlefield that I control. So the way this deck is set up, it's running a bunch of artifact creatures. Because Intimidate makes it so creatures can only be blocked by creatures that share a color, those artifact creatures are basically unblockable when Vela's in play. And since stuff deals damage when it leaves the battlefield, there's a lot of things that make artifact creature tokens in the deck as well. So in addition to those then being unblockable, I can sacrifice them all to some kind of a altar or something to deal damage to people. And then because I'm making artifact creature tokens, I have a bunch of like Tezzerets in the deck that deal damage to people based on the amount of artifacts in play. So there's a lot of synergy there with just artifact creatures in general. Mystic Forge lets me look at the top card of my library, and if it's a colorless artifact card, I can cast it from the top of my library. It also lets you tap it and lose a life to exile that card. So I can dig down one basically to find an artifact card I want to cast. In that deck, it kind of functions like a Phyrexian Arena. There's definitely combos with it, like with some kind of a cost reducer, and if you have Divining Top, you can just draw your whole library because you put Divining Top on top to draw a card, cast it for 1 off the top, and the cost is reduced. So, like, essentially you can put your entire library in your hand. And I'm not doing that. I'm not running top. So it's not a combo piece there. I was, yes. Once upon a time I was until I discovered that accidentally. Like, not that it wasn't an unknown combo, but I wasn't familiar with it until I had it happen. I'm like, oh, I just dropped my entire library. So I wound up pulling top out because of that. It's not a combo engine, though, in the deck at this point. It's basically a Phyrexian Arena kind of as an artifact. It has probably a little more upside because there's a lot of things that reduce the cost of artifacts in the deck, so I can cast the cards for free, and I can sometimes chain 3 or 4 off in a row, and sometimes I don't get any. But it also adds to my artifact count, which is a big deal in that deck, and I can recur it with Buried Ruin. I can go find it with Inventor's Fair. So it being an artifact is very important. In my knee-jerk response would be to just replace it with like a Phyrexian Arena, but I don't know if I like the fact that it interacts with the rest of the deck in a way that Arena wouldn't. As an artifact, I can animate it as well with things like Karn, and I just liked it being an artifact. So if I lost Mystic Forge, I think I would go with something like Mind's Eye or maybe Scroll Rack. They're not exact replacements, but they still let me get cards. They still are artifacts, so they interact with the rest of the deck. So I think that's the route I would go. It's not a perfect replacement, but Mind's Eye or Scroll Rack, probably one of those two.
I'm very surprised to hear that you're not playing Scroll Rack to begin with in that deck.
You know, I don't know if there's a specific reason for it, because I do tend to draw a good amount of cards in the deck, but it's not crazy like my Sphinx deck, and I don't have a ton of shuffle effects either. So I think I might wind up getting locked often enough that it would be frustrating. So I think if I wound up switching to Scroll Rack, then I might want to put in like a Fabled Passage and put in a couple more fetch kind of effects to get more shuffles.
Yep.
Just so I didn't get locked, so that might lead to more changes. Maybe just Divining Top again would work too. Maybe I'll just go back to Divining Top. Who knows?
Yeah, the ability to flip it with the top cards is pretty good.
So it would definitely, I think I would stick with an artifact effect of some sort.
I'm shocked you kind of say Mind's Eye. One, the CMC just to cast it is so higher than Mystic Forge or top. And second, this is a deck where you don't run any counter spells, and you have a handful of instants. I think there's 6 in the deck. So it's pretty rare when I see you actually leave mana up late in the game with this deck to do stuff with. So having Mind's Eye is like, that's a whole new way you might have to play the deck to leave resources up to continue to get value off of Mind's Eye.
And now that you say that and me thinking about that, that's very true. There aren't any counter spells in the deck. And Mind's Eye isn't maybe that great of a card in just general nowadays. I think the game has kind of got a little bit too fast for it for the most part. So now that you say that might definitely be true. I think there are decks. I don't think it's a bad card, but that's true. It might not be a good fit here. It's one of those cards that I might have tried that swap, and then after like 3 or 4 games been like, that just didn't work well in this deck. So Scroll Rack might wind up being the logical replacement. Yep. That's a very good point. All right, Chris, I think you have the next one here for me.
I do. This next deck we're going to talk about falls into the CEDH category.
First day back and already firing shots. Look at that.
already firing the hot takes. Right.
We're going to talk about the Recce of History, right? Recce History of Kamigawa. Am I right on that one? I don't know. Yes. All I know is it's just, let's play a legendary and draw a card and kill you in 3 turns. So first card I want to talk about is Concordant Crossroads.
So Concordant Crossroads, so the deck, Chris mentioned it, it's Recce, it's all legends, and it tends to kind of legendary storm off and draw me, a creature that turns into a card, that turns into a creature that becomes a card. Concordant Crossroads is so good in that deck because I get that turn sometimes where I put 6 or 7 creatures in play, and Crossroads is what lets me then attack with them all that turn. Or if I hit a big Kamal's Druidic Vow or something along those lines, Genesis Wave, it lets me also get that finishing turn versus having to wait and hope nobody board wipes. Unfortunately, there really isn't a replacement for it. There's Crashing Drawbridge as an artifact creature that you can tap, but I'm intentionally limiting myself to only legendary creatures, and Crashing Drawbridge is not legendary. So yes, I could replace it with Crashing Drawbridge, and if I wasn't being so strict about the creatures I'm running, Crashing Drawbridge would be the obvious replacement, even though that has to be in play to work, I would still probably use that. But since I'm not doing that, I don't know if there is a good replacement. I do have a Chroma's Memorial already in the deck as a haste effect. I think in this case, there just isn't anything in mono green that does the job. So I would just have to resign myself to no longer having the ability to do that. And I'd have to come up with something else. Maybe I would run another, like a Worldly Tutor in that slot so I could go get something like Kamal that actually gives a creature, not Kamal, excuse me.
Sirach
the Hunt Caller, there we go. Thanks, Max. That actually gives my creatures haste or something. So maybe I'd have to go that route. But I think there's no good replacement. So I think that makes sense. It might be something like another tutor just to go get Sirach. But honestly, I would probably just put another creature in that slot then.
But what would you put in? I mean, it's just, like even as I looked at it, I was like, there's just really no good replacement for this card.
Yeah, there really isn't.
The nice thing is, if Concordant Crossroads were to be banned, you have 2 other haste enablers in the deck. You have Sirach, like you said, and you have a Chroma's Memorial.
Yeah.
So there are ways to get haste. It's not like this is your only output of haste in the entire deck.
And Concordant Crossroads is a fairly recent addition to this deck. This deck is probably 4 years old now, and Crossroads has been in it for maybe a year, if that. Probably about a year. So I survived. The deck played just fine without it before I had it in there, and it would function fine afterwards. But yeah, this is one of those cards that in green is just not an effect that really has a good replacement. So I would probably just have to accept the fact that I can't replace with anything and move on to something else.
No, are you already playing like Heroic Intervention or any of the protection spells?
I am. Okay. Yep, I have Heroic Intervention in there as well. And maybe I would go to something too like Veil of Summer, just to protect my creatures, or there's a couple green spells like give your creatures regeneration till end of turn or something.
Yep.
Maybe I'd have to go to something like that just to buy myself a turn, hopefully.
Yeah, I was just thinking something that could save you from that board wipe of some way or whatever.
Yeah. So maybe that's what I would do. I do think so many times, though, it's about wanting to do everything that turn. I think I would just have to deal with it not being there and just run more offense.
Yep.
So
makes sense. So let's talk about another card in the CEDH deck. This card is just beyond broken in single color decks, in my opinion, and that is Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx.
Nykthos is so good. I still think it's maybe underplayed. And it's a $25 card now because it's seeing enough play in Pioneer and stuff, but I still think it doesn't get enough love. Again, there's no perfect replacement here. Gaia's Cradle, but like that's Gaia's Cradle. I mean, that's $400, whatever crazy price it is right now. That's the obvious replacement here. I think in this particular deck, Nykthos might be slightly better than Cradle, although Cradle's pretty great too. So, I mean, you could go that route. Other than that, there's no good replacement for Nykthos. Maybe at that point I would try Nyx Lotus again.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's one that I might just wind up going with something like Nyx Lotus. Or there's even a couple of those lands that you can sacrifice, come into play tap, sacrifice for 2 green, I forget what it's called. The colored version of Crystal Veins is the one that's colorless. Maybe something like that just to get some burst out if I needed to like have one big turn and get a couple extra mana, maybe something along those lines I might try to go with as well.
Okay.
What about, I know it's not legendary, but something like Doubling Cube?
Yeah, maybe. That might work too.
Because you have enough other doublers in the deck,
Yeah. And I also, one card I took out a while back, Zendikar Resurgent. And that's one I could always try that again too. Obviously it's not a land, but if I really felt I needed one more way to get a big, huge pile of mana, maybe I could use that as well.
Okay. Last but not least, Dana, we're going to go on to your Isperia deck. And my card in question is, because this is really the card that helps win the game whenever you play this deck against me, is True Conviction. What would you replace that with if that were banned?
True Conviction is so good. And the lifelink makes a huge difference in that deck as well, because I think the last time we played in person, Max, I came back and won at 1 life.
Yes, you did.
In part because of the True Conviction. Makes a big difference there. Duelist Heritage is a really, really good card, and I'm not currently running in the deck, and that might be the easy swap here. It doesn't get you the lifelink, though, and being able to, even if I don't use True Conviction to win a game, there's been enough times when it just, one hit with it stabilizes me enough to then, a couple turns later, find some other win condition, and Duelist Heritage doesn't have that advantage, so missing out on that would hurt. But I would be looking at Duelist Heritage. Other thing I would maybe consider is something like Corrupted Consciousness, which is the control magic, basically, to take control of a creature, but it also has Infect.
Okay.
Oh.
Because it gives me, number one, if I need to, I can put it on my own creature and have a chance to one-shot somebody if I needed to. Or if I have, an extra turn off Madomi or something, 2 hits is enough to kill someone with Infect. And it has the ability to take someone's creature as well. So you could either use it as a control magic to take a big beater from somebody else, or just give one of your creatures Infect. Grafted Exoskeleton kind of might do a similar thing too if I wanted a way to kill somebody. I could also go with Approach of the Second Sun. It wouldn't help me stabilize, but like if I wanted to stay with a win condition, Approach might also work. I don't have an Approach in that deck. And it is kind of a control deck, so I could definitely use that probably as a way to win sometimes too. So those would probably be what I would go with there.
Now, what about that blue enchantment where all your flying creatures get like +2, -2 or whatever it is, or +2, +0?
And that wouldn't be bad either. I ran that for a while, and it actually is really useful as well to shut down somebody else's ground creatures. Like, you're playing against someone's goblin deck, they're just like, oh man, I'm just screwed now.
Yep.
So, like, it really is good defensively too. And that only came out at some point because, I needed to put something else in, and and it was good, but you just need to make cuts sometimes. And maybe that's Gravitational Shift is what that card is. Maybe I'll go back to Gravitational Shift too. Maybe I could do that, or even Dictate to Heliod, giving stuff +2/+2
at instant speed.
Being able to do it at instant speed is a big deal there too, to surprise people with that. So that could also kind of do a similar thing, maybe. Yeah. That's a good suggestion. Okay, should we look at a few of Max's decks now?
Sure.
Uh-oh.
We'll look at the scumbags decks.
Yeah. So first of all, Max, we have your Regna and Krav deck. That's one of your more recent builds here. I think is that your newest? Chulane's your newest deck, but this is your newest one that you've had for a while.
Yeah, it's up there. Grumgully's in there somewhere, but yeah, that's probably my most recent deck next to those two. Yeah.
So the card we picked here is Aetherflux Reservoir.
Oh, yeah, the Death Star. That's always a fun card.
Yeah.
So
the Death Star.
So Aetherflux Reservoir is in the deck because this is all about me gaining lots of life when Krav eats all my little tiny tokens, and it just gets to a point where I can draw Aetherflux, tutor for it, drop it, and just kind of have a target out there for someone to, use a removal spell on it so it doesn't hit Krav or Regna. And also blasting someone for 40 life is fun, or 50 life is a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
If it were to be banned, though, I think I would just swap it out with something else that's going to deal people a lot of damage in one fall swoop. I mean, I'm already running Blood Bond and Torment of Hellfire, so something like Exsanguinate would probably fit the bill there. Being able to cast that for, X equaling, 6 or 8, it's still going to do a lot of life loss for the entire table and boost me up to where I feel safe for the next handful of turns.
Now, are you already running the third piece of the Blood Bond combo?
Mr. Vito himself?
Yeah.
Yeah, he just got slotted in.
Okay, I was going to say, nice. If you're not, then that, in my opinion, could be a replacement so you get more of that combo set up.
Yeah, Vito is a new addition to the deck. Haven't drawn him yet, but yeah, I would definitely add him first if he wasn't already in there.
Yeah, makes sense.
How about Hatred?
Oh.
See, Hatred is good. I used to run it in my Lycia deck back when I had that put together. My issue with it is the fact that typically Krav has some sort of protection on him, whether it's Whisper Silk Cloak or Lightning Greaves. So I can't target Krav when he's my win condition just through beats with Hatred.
Oh, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see that. If only Hatred was green, I feel like that would just be the most frustrating card in Dragonlord Jamoka.
It would be the best card in Dragonlord Jamoka.
Now that Max brought that up too, because there's that black enchantment that you pay life to put counters on or whatever it is. That wouldn't work neither.
Yeah, for the same reason. Yeah. It's in a lot of Marchesa decks, Chris, and I'm forgetting the name of it as well.
I can't. It's like a 3-mana enchantment too. I know.
I can picture it too, but I can't think of it. Someone's yelling at their radio right now. You idiots! It's.
I'm fine with that. That's fine. They can yell at me. I've never been good with the names of cards. I just know that there's a card that does this, and then I got to Scryfall search it to find it.
Right. So, Chris, why don't you give us Max's Dragonlord Jamoka deck next?
Oh. The big goddess herself, Dragonlord Dramoka. So, Max, let's talk about one card, starting off in particular, that I have seen just do massive amounts of work, and that is the wonderful equipment called Black Blade Reforged.
Oh, yeah, the sword. I love that card.
Which makes no sense to me because dragons can't hold swords, but that's fine.
They can in my world.
What, in their mouth or something that come flying at you?
So just to make sure when they land on you, they just stab it through you to make sure you're dead.
Right.
Ooh, if that were to be banned, that'd be tough because, that sometimes gives my creatures plus 11, plus 15, just depending on how many lands I have out.
It's also something that you as your opponent can't respond to. Like, you've taken one hit from Jamoka, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I'll be fine for a couple turns before he can kill me. Pass to Max. Max casts Black Vader Forge, and we can't cast spells on your turn. So we're like, oh, well, now Jamoka's going to kill me, and I can't do anything about it. Like, that's what is so really, really good about that card in that deck. As your opponent, we can't respond to it, and it's super cheap to cast and cheap to equip onto a legend, and you just die.
Yeah.
Yep.
The fact that it's so cheap to equip onto a legend made it hard to kind of analyze this card for me. So I looked at it as a 5 mana spell, not a 9 mana spell, trying to equip it to something else.
Sure.
My first thought would be Dictate a Heliod. Dana, you mentioned that in your Speria deck.
Mm-hmm.
I think I actually used to run this card in Jamoka years ago in one of the early versions. The fact that it's now more of a kind of a slow play control deck, I think Dictate would be a good fit because it can flash in. I can cast it on my turn with Jamoka out and not have to worry about it. Just giving +2/+2 across my entire board is really good when everything already has a base power of 4 or 5. Other than that,
you don't want to run any other type of artifact or anything? Like
no.
Another sword or something?
If I were to run one of the Sword of X and Ys, I could do the Feast and Famine, but I don't really do a lot with my mana when it's not my turn. So I don't need that benefit of untapping all my lands. The one that proliferates, if it, and can hit a Planeswalker would be cool, but I don't really run Planeswalkers or do much stuff with +1/+1 counters in that deck. So I really think it would just be like an Anthem effect or some sort of aura like a Bear Umbra, even though, again, I'm not probably going to use all that mana when it untaps on my attack trigger.
Okay.
Otherwise, that deck already runs a very low amount of creatures. I think with Jamoka, there's 18 total. Finding another creature in there would just probably be better. Angel of the Dire Hour is something I've ran in the past, which I would probably consider running again just because of how slow the deck likes to play, and I run other effects like it, such as Settle the Wreckage. Just having some redundancy there would be pretty nice.
Okay.
I do like that.
Those are all good answers, yeah. The other card here in this deck, Max, Teferi's Protection.
Why am I the only one that gets to talk about this card? It's in all of your decks too, Dana.
It is. I have it in my decks
really
as well.
Curious if this is probably the number one most played card in decks, aside from like lands, because I see it in like every deck.
I think the main thing that would hurt it is its price, because it's it's never been less than $30, I don't think, and I hope it's in Commander Masters or something, just so we can get more copies out there for people. But
exactly.
Yeah, I think that would hurt it. I think if it was cheaper, every white deck would run it. Like, there's just no reason not to.
It is the number 9th highest played card in white, according to EDHREC. I'm looking at it right now.
Okay.
Despite the price, that's crazy.
Yeah, I was just curious because it's played in everything.
Right. So this does something very, very unique. It phases your stuff out, gives you protection from everything. I'm already running Heroic Intervention in that deck, and I think I run Eerie Interlude too. Those are kind of my protection suites. If I had to replace Teferi's Protection, my first go-to would be Flawless Maneuver. This was the free spell from the Mardu deck this year for the commander decks.
Yep.
It just gives your creatures indestructible until end of turn, and it's 2 and a white to cast it if you have to pay the cost.
Yep.
Benefits there, it doesn't exile itself, so I can regrowth it or Seasons Past it back to my hand, stuff like that. But otherwise, I think I would just probably not worry about losing Teferi's Protection. I'd find another piece of ramp or another creature, but Flawless Maneuver would be the first thing I'd slot in if I wanted to go that route.
Okay. Because it's not like you don't have any other options. I think if it would be the kind of thing you'd be much more likely to replace with Flawless Maneuver if you didn't also have Heroic Intervention and, like you said, Eerie Interlude. So you do have a few other backup plans. So it's probably a little easier to lose even if those don't save your other stuff. So that makes sense. The last one here, Max, your Brago deck. And I guess this is another a big commonly played card, but it's a tough one to have an easy replacement for, and that's Cyclonic Rift.
Yeah, Rift. We've all talked about this card before in the past. I don't want to see it get banned, but I'm also okay if it does, because there are similar
Right.
cards out there.
It's one of those cards I don't want to see it banned as long as I'm the only person casting it.
So I think the first idea would be replace it with something like Aether Spouts or Aether Eyes. Very similar effects, just isn't the entire board.
Yeah.
But after last week us talking about counterspells, Dana, I don't run one of my favorites, which is Arcane Denial. And I kind of feel like that would be more beneficial than, ridding all of my opponent's attacking creatures, like an Aether Spout or an Aether Eyes. So I'd rather probably slot in another counterspell there. Same CMC, it draws me a card, and it really does stop that Swords to Plowshares or that board wipe or something like that.
Right. Yeah, those things both make sense. A counterspell is going to stop the problem, like you said. Aether Spouts and Aether Eyes are both really, really good cards, and I think one of the main reasons people don't talk about them that much is because Cyclonic Rift is just so insane.
Yeah.
It's just way more efficient. I mean,
Yeah.
having double abilities and... Ugh.
Yep.
And Rift is so flexible, you can attack it, you can cast it before you attack just to clear the way, or you can cast it in response to something, so versus the other two where something has to have happened for you to want to cast those things.
Right. Yeah. Rift is just so nuts. But I wouldn't feel bad like if it was gone. I'm like, well, I guess I'm running Aether Spouts now. I mean, that's still a really good card. So it's not like you should feel bad about having it in your deck. It's still real solid. Chris, let you go last because you're fresh to the show and you need to get your bearings. So, so we're hitting your decks last here.
Got to stretch a little bit,
All right. Yeah. Limber up. You don't want to pull anything here. I get it. That makes sense. Max, what do you have for him first here?
So we're going to kick it off with your Alesha, Who Smiles at Death deck. First card on the chopping block is Cathar's Crusade.
Yep, I just trashed the deck. It's done. We're not playing this anymore. No, this card, in my opinion, is that card that turns this deck from an annoyance into one of those life and death situations. Like when this hits the board, you know that big things are going to happen and there's not a whole lot you can do about it if you don't have the removal base for it. So I took a good look at this and I came up with two options. I could thin the deck out of some of those like loose flex cards or whatever, and I could add a whole bunch of anthems, such as Dictate, Glorious Anthem. There's other ones that you could play too, just to get that suite of the token build so they become like 2/2s, 3/3s, 4/4s, or whatever else. But still, that still just does not quite replace Cathar's Crusade. So the other idea I had was we could go into combo-oriented cards. Now, this deck is based on ETB triggers, doubling those triggers, making tokens, all that kind of fun stuff. So why not play like Impact Tremors or Perforos? And then this came into my mind that, hey, guess what? As soon as you play Perforos and they know how this deck is played, there's going to be a beautiful target right on my glorious face going, he dies first. So those were my two ideas with this. Honestly, the best route would be to go more of an Anthem theme. Stays more with the tokens and the ETB triggers, because the ETB triggers are going to happen no matter what. But why not just make all the little guys who are triggering everything bigger so they can come in for beats?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the anthems, especially because it doesn't impact the creatures when they're in the graveyard. So you can still recur them.
Right.
Well, I've ran both sides before. And honestly, the anthems just work better because people kind of let the anthem slide compared to combo pieces. If they come down, they're immediately removed off the board and everything like that.
Sure. The one thing I thought of was the damage increasers that aren't like a +2/+2, but you have things like Gratuitous Violence or the new Tripler, Fiery Emancipation. But you do have a lot of smaller creatures in there, 1/1s, 2/2s and stuff. And I guess the Tripler still makes it a deal 6 damage. That's still pretty good. It makes a 1 deal 3, so I guess it's not that much different. But it's a 3-color deck, and both of those have triple red in the casting cost, which gets kind of tricky sometimes in a 3-color deck too. So,
well, I was also thinking with the creatures being so small, you kind of want them bigger so they can serve a dual purpose. So
right.
If someone swings at you with a 5/5, it's like, oh, well, my 1/1's a 5/5. I can block with that.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Good point. Yeah, I think that makes sense too. I think in your shoes, I would probably be looking at doing something with those, with the anthems as well. So I can see that. All right, let's go over to your Mogus deck. This one was tricky.
This one's going to be easy for me. I've played this deck since like almost day one.
And it was tricky to find a card for it because so many of the cards are just like do X damage to players. And even though a lot of them are different, the effect is kind of the same.
Yep.
So like pulling out one of them just means you're like, well, I'll just put in a different one of those effects,
I felt the same way. If you ban one of those damage doublers, you might as well ban them all then.
Yep.
Right. So the one thing I came up with here is Chaos Warp, because it's really the only thing in those colors that just solves any problem. It doesn't, red can deal with artifacts, but it's usually on a card that deals exclusively with artifacts. Black can hit creatures, but it can't hit artifacts. So you usually have to pick your removal spells kind of carefully. Chaos Warp lets you just solve any problem, so there's really nothing else like it. So then it comes down to, if you lose Chaos Warp, do you just run a replacement removal effect in Rakdos colors, which isn't as good probably, or do you just go with one of the ones that hit any target, like Unstable Obelisk or Spine of Isha or something, but that costs a ton of mana? Okay. So I'm curious what way you go here.
So I looked at Chaos Warp, not in terms of this card being able to remove just enchantments. I looked at it in terms of this card can remove anything. So I thought about it long and hard, and I went back to the mindset of, if you're playing red, just get over it. You're not going to ever be able to deal with enchantments.
Yeah, I mean, no, we're both laughing, but like that's kind of what I do too most of the time. I'm like, well, it's my weakness, and I can either run a bad solution or just run a good card and accept I'm going to be weak.
Yeah, because I thought about that new black one that can destroy enchantments, and I was like, okay, so they're the same CMC, but Chaos Warp is just strictly way, way better. So you just you can't get around that. So yeah. In my theory, I was thinking of things that can do multiple things, or they have a huge amount of flexibility. And I came up with 3 of them. Now, while one of these is weaker than the other 2, it is what it is. I came up with Dreadbore, which gets rid of a creature or a planeswalker. Sorcery speed, so obviously it's a weak card, but it can do 2 things at once. Yeah. The other one was Bedevil. Now, Bedevil hits creature, planeswalker, and something else, I think. I don't remember what else it hits, or maybe it's just creature and planeswalker. But it's instant speed, a little bit more mana, but it's still got that versatility to hit multiple things. The last one I came up with was Rakdos Charm. Rakdos Charm, by far, I think is the best out of the 3. While yes, I'm not gaining the removal aspect of it, I do gain a slight win con, depending on what you're playing against. Or you can just get rid of a graveyard, or, I think it destroys an artifact is the other thing it does. So it's multiple modes that can just do whatever in a pinch. So it's not something that you have to rely on just doing one thing with it. You can choose which you need to do, depending on the situation.
And Bedevil is an artifact creature or planeswalker.
It is an artifact. Okay. I thought it was just pretty similar to Kolaghan's command, 3 mana to do 3 things, but I couldn't quite remember.
Yeah, Bedevil is a pretty good card, and you are in a 2-color deck, so that casting cost of double black and a red, which can be tricky, is much easier to hit in just a 2-color deck than it would be in a 3-color deck.
It doesn't even phase somewhat usually. Yeah. You should be running, for me, I try to run almost all the duels that you can for it. If someone ever looks at my deck list, they're going to be like, why do you run that Guildgate? It's because it's a duel. I need every, both colors.
Well, and that's a good point, too, about Rakdos Charm. Yes, it doesn't hit as many targets as Chaos Warp, but there are situations when someone drops an Avengers Zendikar, and they're like, okay, I've got, 14 tokens, and you're just like, and you're dead. I'm Rakdos Charming, you just died.
That was a mistake.
Yeah, but I mean, that's really, really good. That's that's a trade-off, but in some situations, that's a pretty good trade-off.
Yeah, that's why I looked at Chaos Warp not as to what it does, but how versatile it is. So you want to replace it with something that's almost as versatile, but in different aspects of the game.
Good call. Max, last one to you.
Your last deck, Chris, is your Amanatu the Fate Shifter deck. First card today is Approach of the Second Sun.
Oh, yeah, the one I just win. What's up, guys? Can you stop me? I didn't think so. So, and yes, before... I'm assuming you guys will post our deck lists and stuff like that on the thing or whatever. Now, before any of you people who are listening to this comment to me, yes, there are 29 lands in that deck. It was brought up to me, and yes, there are 29 lands. I need to fix that. So, next thing, we'll talk about Approach. Now, I thought about this one extremely hard. This one was the hardest one for me to really think about what to do with this, because the deck is pretty much built around Approach. It has all the top deck manipulation, has digging through the deck, lots and lots of card draw. It's meant to play Approach, get Approach back in your hand that same turn, if possible, or coming up to your next turn. So I thought about this, and why not we go a big mana route? So very similar to what Mono Blue Teferi does, where he untaps mana rocks, you tap them, make all this, whole bunch of mana. But instead of doing this to do a Blue Sun Zenith to win the game or something like that, why don't we just use mass manipulation or entreat the angels and just make a whole bunch of stuff, but not actually, make people upset about it? So if we choose that route, what we need to do is to think about a recursion, other stuff like that. And now this also revolves around the same thing with playing the Perforos in Alesha, is that it puts a huge target because they're like, oh, he's making, 400 million mana. What's he going to do with it? And everyone's going to think, oh, he's going to go Lab Man combo or something like that.
Sure.
I mean, that's pretty much where I came up with that. The other idea I had with this was we could just start swapping out Planeswalkers. Because a lot of the Planeswalkers in here are meant for tutoring or card draw or manipulation type of deal. So then we'd have to go to more of the walkers that they can help to protect themselves, protect you, and in a pinch could turn around the game so you can win. One of the key examples that I have is like Ugin the Spirit Dragon. He comes out, wipes the board, and then he starts upticking to shoot somebody, and then you get a whole bunch of cards and play permanents, which that's probably the only Planeswalker that does that kind of stuff, but it's still, what I would be looking for. Other than that, I could do like Sensi's Divining Top and Miracles and all that. So pretty much what I came down to, if I get Lost Approach, I would probably go into more of the Miracle route with like big mana and playing like X spells that just to have fun, like Mass Manipulation. Let's pay 20 mana into Mass Manipulation and take like 6 permanents from someone and be like, ha ha ha, what's up?
I've seen you do that. I've seen you do that.
Yeah. Or you could just use Entreat, like I was saying, because Entreat, I think, is a very fair card. Yes, you Miracle it, make 30 tokens or whatever, but when you're playing these colors, you don't have a haste enabler or anything. It's wide open for someone to just knock them out and be like, well, you screwed up there, now what are you going to do? So what are your guys' ideas on that? Because Approach it's one that you just can't replace.
I'll let Max throw something out here first before I jump in.
Okay. So yeah, I kind of agree with you, Chris. The way the deck is currently built, approach being taken out, you'd have to rebuild the deck, I think.
Yep.
How to take it, I really like the Miracles idea. You don't see that very often in EDH. And there's enough Miracle stuff between the 3 colors. I mean, we just got our first Black Miracle card a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that'd be a really cool way to take it because it's unique. You don't see it a lot. But yeah, that's all I really have to say is if you take Approach out, you got to do something different completely.
The one suggestion I had, or I guess it winds up being 2 suggestions that you could kind of do as well. Smothering Tithe is a great card in any deck just in general, and you could very easily run Smothering Tithe here without, in place of a Mana Rock or something, and that I think would be a perfect fine move. And if you were to do that, then Revel in Riches.
Oh, yes.
Also would give you, again, is also a great card on its own. So you could very easily run Revel in Riches and never feel bad if you only ever saw Revel in Riches.
Yep.
And when you combine the 2 of them, it gives you just one more alt-win con in that deck that kind of is control-y anyway. And you can, buy yourself time to be able to get the treasure tokens out via either stuff dying or people drawing their cards with Revel in Riches. So I think that's not 1 card, that's 2, but I think that would be a pretty easy swap you could wind up doing there as well, maybe to do a similar thing.
Okay. Yep, I do like that.
I really like that idea, Dana, because I'm just on Scryfall right now. There are 10 cards Chris could run, 9 cards Chris could run in those color combinations that specifically blue, where creatures, when they ETB, they create a treasure.
Nice.
There's an instant that does it. There's a handful of cards that create treasures that aren't just, through Pitiless Plunder or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The other issue I had with this is the whole reason that I built this deck was to follow the rules that you were playing in your Jiro deck of
right.
X amount of creatures versus X amount of planeswalkers. So I tried to take a different approach with it, and this is where I ended up. So it's like, do I stick to it where I'm trying to keep it so it's on par with Jeru, or do I just change it up all completely or whatever?
I actually quite like the fact that this is you're using Amanatu as a Planeswalker commander to win with Approach.
Yep.
That's a super cool way to build a deck. So I of all the bans, this is the one I would, not that Approach is going to get banned, but this is the deck I'd like to see the change the least. Just because that's, I think, a really fun way to build that commander.
Yep. I think out of all the cards that we did discuss today, Cyclonic Rift could be one that could get banned, and Approach wouldn't surprise me because Wizards doesn't seem to like the I win cards in Commander, the ones that say just straight up I win the game, it's done type of deal. They try to make them a little bit harder, and this is probably the easiest of them that's out there to use to win, just to straight up win the game.
Yeah, I think it is real, although I don't think it's a problem necessarily either.
No, it's not a problem, but if they stuck along the lines of, down the road, something made this, easily grabbed, it would get just ban hammer immediately.
Well, where approach winds up getting banned, I think, is if there's some new commander that comes out, some new legend that comes out that gives you really easy access to approach that they didn't really think things through on. They're like, oh, we didn't mean to do that. Like that's where approach winds up being a victim, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, that was super fun. That was in part because Chris was back, but that was interesting.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
It really had me going through my decks and thinking about ideas and stuff like that, and how I want to actually change my decks now too. And now I'm onto the Archidec train, and I can't believe you guys suckered me into this, but it was actually super easy to put my cards in, so I really enjoyed it.
Architect's really easy to use, and I like the interface. The fact that you can see all your stuff right there on one screen, I think is useful, and the playtest feature is nice. I like Architect quite a bit, and I've gotten to hang out and play with Andy, who runs it, the lead developer. At Vegas last year, we played with him, Max and I did, and he's a super nice guy as well, so I like everything about Architect.
For everyone who's listening, going forward, I'm going to try to keep my deck list up to date, because I've had numerous people ask me about them, so they are on Architect now, my 3 top played decks, and anything else nice. I make I will put on and try to do updates as I swap out cards here and there, and we'll go from there.
All right, cool. Chris, once again, welcome back. Glad to have you back, man.
Yeah, welcome back, buddy.
I don't know who you're talking about. This is Samuel. I am from Ireland or something like that.
Your Irish accent needs a touch of work.
Oh, I've never had a good accent of anything.
right now we have some Irish listener who's super mad about that.
Yeah.
So we apologize, Samuel O'Flanahan, for Chris's Irish accent. And for me saying Samuel O'Flanahan. All right. That is going to wrap up this episode of Commander Central. Thank you very much for listening. I'd like to thank our editor, Rafael Garcia. You can find him on the Twitter birds at Ursa Bearwalker. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. We'll be back next week with a new show. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.